Everyone. Can you hear me? You hear me well? Great. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Nir. I'm Director of Publishing in Supersonic Studios by Unity. And today I'm going to speak about a bit of the trends and the market changes on the hyper-casual, hybrid casual, and the gaming industry as a whole. We're going to go over the market trends, how to deal with those changes, and where should we focus in order to keep growing our businesses in the gaming, hyper-casual, hybrid casual market. Cool. So starting with the monetization eCPM trend, this is a graph that represents the eCPM, which is the effective cost per 1,000 impressions, meaning how much revenue we're making for each ad impression that we're showing in our games. This trend is from Iron Source Network from the beginning of 2021 until today. So basically what we can see is during 2021, we had a massive and significant increase in the monetization eCPM, meaning that for the same in-game metrics with the same ad impressions, we're getting much higher LTV. This was the all-time record of this monetization, basically eCPM. Starting from the end of 21 and the beginning of 2022, we started to see a massive decrease in the monetization eCPM, which obviously caused to decrease in the LTV and the revenue that we're getting for each ad impression, both, by the way, interstitials and rewarded videos, meaning that for the same games with the same amount of ad impressions that we're showing for users, we're getting a lower LTV. What we do see is that basically the numbers that we saw during the second half of 21 and the first half of 2022 was higher than the average, and basically today we're kind of getting back to the normal numbers before COVID and before the market crisis that we have been having since the beginning of 2022. The last thing that we can see from this graph is basically that we see a positive trend on the last several months of the eCPMs, that they're slightly increasing, and we expect those numbers to keep increasing over this summer, which is a good news for our LTV and for our business. Another point of view that would be interesting to see is basically the S&P 500 trend, which has quite a similar correlation to the eCPM trend, which makes sense. And obviously also here we can see that over the past month, we do see after the economic crisis, we do see that the market is starting to recover, and we expect to see the same positive trend over the monetization eCPMs. The other side of the coin. So basically, if we have the monetization eCPM, which means the revenue that we're making for each ad impression, on the other side, we have the user acquisition eCPM. What we can see here is basically the CPI trend in Supersonic games from Facebook Android, which represent the same trend that we saw with the monetization eCPM, but on the user acquisition side, how much it costs to acquire users for the games. And comparing to the monetization, we also saw during 2021 an increase, basically obviously because of the competition and because of the IDFA changes that increased the CPIs in the industry. And the difference and the main thing to focus at this graph is basically the downtrend, which we couldn't see the same downtrend on the UA side as we saw on the monetization side. And therefore, the formula of the LTV CPI narrowed down, which basically makes the profitability of those games a bit lower. We do see a positive trend also over the past months with a slight downtrend in the user acquisition eCPMs and CPIs, which again, it's a good trend, but we will need to see the monetization eCPMs keep climbing in order to go back to the healthy margins and LTV that we used to see and that we want to see. As a result of basically those two sides of the both monetization and user acquisition, on the right side we can see that basically the trend I took May during 2021, 22, and 23. And what we can see is basically a dramatic decrease in the amount of hyper-casual games, classic hyper-casual games that we're seeing on the top United States chart. This is from Data AI. So over May 21, we saw 11 out of 15 games in the top charts. Then we saw a decrease to 7. And this May last month, it was only one hyper-casual game over the top 15 US most downloaded games. Again, this is basically the result of the decrease in the eCPMs and both the user acquisition eCPM that wasn't decreased in accordance to the monetization side. Two important things to mention is that basically we are seeing more hybrid games which behaves much differently than classic hyper-casual games. Classic hyper-casual games with very, very high marketability, they have many installs and quite low LTV, so the margin of those type of games would be similar to hybrid game with much higher LTV, less installs, but it will make the same revenues and profits. So this is also something that the industry is going towards in the past several months or year. And also we know and we can see that because of the fact that we have less hyper-casual games in the top charts, basically we have less supply as advertisers that we want to acquire more users for hyper-casual games. Usually we're buying them on other hyper-casual games. So if we have less supply, less games in the top charts, so it's basically harder to buy more type of users from hyper-casual games. So we also need to compete with other applications such as casual games. So this is also an interesting point. To summarize basically the high-scale, low LTV model, so for example, we have Chatmaster, which we published during 2021, was super marketable game, quite low LTV, and it did amazingly. I would say that these days, it's still possible to find those games. It's harder, it's right, but they're still here. We are seeing it over the past year. Even though it's harder, we still see successful classic hyper-casual games, mainly monetized by interstitials, that's making a very nice revenues. But overall, we can see that until we'll see those monetization eCPMs are coming back to normal and increasing, the profitability formula of those specific games that's mainly based on interstitials is lower, and obviously we would really love to see those monetization eCPMs increasing and the profitability formula getting back to normal. To summarize, so basically, as I said, we do see those hyper-casual games with very low CPI. They still exist, but as I said, it's much harder to find them. Another thing is that it's much harder to create the engagement metrics that we used to see for those games. It's happening because of mainly two reasons. One is competition. We see more games, we see more casual games, which makes the competition harder. And the second thing is quality demand. Users want more, they want to see beautiful products. As every product, it's not related only for games or hyper-casual. This is a natural evolvement of any type of product. Third thing is basically that because of those lower eCPMs, for the same game with the same CPI and the same retention metrics, we're seeing lower LTV, which I mentioned earlier. And the last thing basically is once the market will recover, and hopefully it will, we expect the eCPM to go back higher, which will make the LTV high again and will makes us be able to scale more games and to find more good concepts. But I think it's important to mention that regarding the quality demand of the games, this is not something that we expect to change. The opposite, we expect the quality to be even better and better. So this is also important to keep in mind. So what next? I do have a positive news, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But I think that there are many ways and innovative ways basically to deal with those market changes until we'll see the market go back again to normal. I think that in the industry there are a lot of talks about hybrid, etc. I think that hybrid is a great example of how to deal with those changes, but it's not the only one. Again, we do see that with the simple classic hyper-casual games, we can create much deeper experience to users, which will create the motivation to watch more rewarded video ads, also IAP, but not necessarily. So those two aspects are super crucial to mention, and this is what we are seeing as a publisher over the past few months, and I will dive deeper into it in a few slides. Cool. So if we're taking, in general, the 4 key elements to deal with those market changes, I would say that the first 2 are similar to what we used to see before. The first one is high-scale, low CPI games. This is something that we don't want to change. This is the core of both hyper-casual and hybrid-casual games. The second thing is a strong core mechanic, which this is something that is essential in order to create those deeper layers and therefore and then moving to more complicated and RV-based monetization. And I will mainly focus today on the third and the fourth points, which is how to create the deeper game loop and deeper experience, and how to create the hybrid monetization or RV monetization layers in the games in order to increase the LTV. The main reason that we want to, that we see that games that's based on more rewarded videos are working much better is, first one, because rewarded video ads has 3 times higher eCPMs and revenue than interstitials. And the second thing is that rewarded videos are significantly improving engagement, retention, playtime. So it's also super positive to late retention. And this is, again, one of the most important metrics for both hybrid games or high LTV games, you name it. So how to create an RV motivation? I think this is the biggest question when we are approaching any type of deeper gameplays and deeper monetization strategies. And I think that game loop, this is the main factor that we are seeing changing over time, over the past 2 years. It's starting with creating a long-term goal for users in order to create much stronger engagement and in order to create late retention, which is something that is crucial in order to create high LTVs. The second thing is meaningful economy, which is, again, without a meaningful economy, it will be super hard to sell users in-app purchases, rewarded videos, and even interstitials. So this is something that we do see evolving and taking a massive place in the new type of hyper-casual games. Challenge, skill. These are 2 things that basically they are super crucial to create and to think when we are creating those games in order to create the motivation for users to pay in their money or in their time by watching rewarded videos or engaging with in-app purchases. Progression and meta, again, in order to create a meaningful experience and to create late retention. Those things we're going to focus in a few slides. And in the end of the loop is basically how to sell and how to create the motivation for rewarded videos and in-app monetization. I wanted to show an example of a classic runner, a classic hyper-casual game we published during 2021, and focus on the game loop that we used to see on those hyper-casual games. You can see that basically the main loop or the main goal is finishing the level. And this was the main the main basically goal that we used to see with those hyper-casual games. You need to run to survive, you collect gems, and then you're spending your gems with a very limited meta or progression features. For example, here we have a skin shop. This was a very popular over most of the hyper-casual games. And I would say that today, it's just not enough. Having a cosmetic meta and game loop, it's something that will be super, super difficult to monetize and to create this rewarded video monetization because users are not getting enough in order to do that or to pay for that. So how can we do it? This is a good example for a game loop, a deeper game loop, and how to think, how to plan this deeper game loop in order to create those much more meaningful experience for users. So again, it's starting from the main goal that we need to have a strong and clear main goal for the game, for the users, in order to create a deeper experience and late retention. So we have the core gameplay, which usually, or the action, which is usually fighting, running, creating, crafting, solving. This is the core gameplay that we used to see as the main goal or the main aspect of the classic hyper-casual games several years ago. Then we need to invest a lot of thinking and A/B testing in level design in order to create the right balances, difficulty level, and economy in order to create a meaningful rewards and a meaningful economy for users to engage, and so they will feel they have a real reason to earn those coins because they have what to do with them afterwards. Then it comes back to skills and a challenge. So I will have a reason to evolve. I will want to evolve, to get better, to progress in the game. Then we're getting into back into the main goal, which is becoming bigger, becoming stronger, seeing more unique content, and building and progressing in my way to achieve my main goal of the game. Now, it's super important to have a methodology for that, because if we're looking back at the classic hyper-casual games, we mainly focus on fun, sticky, and marketable core gameplay. And today, because it's not enough, we need to change the methodology of how we are thinking about games, how we are building them, how we are testing them, and how we are benchmarking them. So this is something I will try to go over the next slide, starting with ideation. And it's something that we need to plan very specifically and to keep to have a lot of brainstorming on not only the core gameplay, but how we're going, once we'll find this strong core gameplay, how we're gonna create this long-term goal, how we're gonna create those selling points, this meaningful economy, upgrades, etc. This is something that we need to plan in advance, not necessarily create a full game in the beginning before we even have any metric, but once we will find this sticky, core, marketable gameplay, we need to have already planned what to do with that afterwards. Second thing is testing, and it's super, super important to test and to measure those selling points event, challenge event, in order to understand if I will be able to sell, once I will add monetization to the game, if I will be able to sell the things that I plan to sell in the ideation phase. And lastly, benchmarking. We need to know exactly what type of events, what type of benchmarks for amount of interstitials, amount of rewarded videos, amount of how users are using the economy, how they're using the coins or any currency in the game. So this is the last thing I'm gonna go over. I wanted to show an example of a classic runner platformer competition game, and how can we create those meaningful economy and create this motivation for rewarded videos and in-app purchases out of a classic hyper-casual game. I took specifically a game that is not hybrid. The in-app purchases layer won't be so significant here, but rewarded videos would be. So first is creating challenge. We need to plan and think in the ideation phase what type of experience the user will have. And it needs to be balanced and adjusted so it won't be too difficult and frustrating. And on the other hand, it won't be too easy, so users will have a reason why to upgrade, why to buy, and why to progress in the game. So we need to think on those specific near-miss moments inside the game, because those moments are the ones that will convert users both on in-app purchases and rewarded videos. Second thing is that we need to create a meaningful upgrade system. Now, if we're looking back at the classic hyper-casual games, usually it's a very simple upgrade system that we only click, usually it's only cosmetic we see, and there is no real depth in the upgrade system. So here we can see that we have many types of upgrades in the game. It can be card system, it can be more of a simple upgrade system, but eventually this is something that I will need my currency that I'm collecting every level in order to upgrade and progress in the game. Lastly, we can see that we need to plan those specific selling points. For example, in the last, on the GIF on the right, we can see that user want to upgrade the wheels, but he has only one. So now we have two options. First one is to wait and to play more levels, earn more coins, and then buy the second wheel and be much faster, much stronger, and win easily the levels. Or I can buy it with rewarded videos, or I can buy coins by in-app purchases and improve it now. So those exact moments, these are the things that we need to plan from the beginning, because after we're building the game, it is very, very difficult to change the balances and to create those selling points, and it takes much, much more time. Again, if we're looking at ad-based, interstitial-based monetization games, usually retention and playtime represent and correlate with LTV in a pretty good way, because the levels are very short. We know that we're going to show interstitial every 20, 30 seconds, and therefore it's very simple to predict the amount of impressions that we will be able to introduce for users and the LTV that we're going to get from those impressions. On rewarded video-based monetization or hybrid monetization, it behaves differently. It's not enough, because the levels usually are much longer, and we can show interstitial every 20, 30 seconds. We even don't want to show interstitial every 20, 30 seconds, because we will lose all of our users. So this is something that is super critical to understand when we are benchmarking and when we are measuring the metrics from the game we're testing and creating. I wanted to show an example of two idle games that we tested. Both of them got very, very strong retention, 50% for both of them. Once we added monetization to the games, basically we saw that for Traffic Jam, we had 12 rewarded video impressions on day 0, which is huge, and 6 interstitials, comparing to Money Hoops, which we only showed 3 rewarded videos. Users engage only with average of 3 rewarded videos and 6 interstitials on the first day, and therefore we had 2 times higher LTV on Traffic Jam comparing to Money Hoops. The main reason is exactly the ideation and planning those selling points and the economy balance that calling users to watch rewarded videos that create that motivation. And this is how important is it both to plan and to measure it, not after 6 months we are working on the game, but after 1 month or after 2 months, after we believe and feel that the core gameplay is strong enough, and now we're moving forward to measure those selling points and if we have a good conversion and engagement rate in those games. Testing. Again, it's super, super important to look different on the metrics that we used to look. If we're looking at a game that we need to create mainly fun game, minimum drops over the levels. Therefore, the levels of interstitial-based hyper-casual games needs to be fun, easy, and we want them to pass as many levels as possible because it will convert perfectly into LTV and the amount of impressions that we will show. On hybrid or RV-based monetization games, it acts much, much different. And in most cases, in order to create this RV or in-app purchases motivation, we will need those fails. We will need this difficulty balances that users will have in order to create that motivation. So it's super crucial to measure the level length and the fail rate and the conversion and the selling points event. And again, it's something that we need to plan in advance even before we're starting to work on the game. Summarizing basically how we measure and test those elements in order to understand that we have a good conversion of the selling points that we're creating in the hybrid and RV monetization games. As we used to see in classic hyper-casual games, retention, playtime, and CPI converted perfectly into LTV and scale and profits. With those games, RV engagement rate, which is how much of our users, how many users engaged with rewarded videos and the amount of impressions they are watching during their sessions, it's as important as CPI, playtime, and retention, and something that I highly recommend to keep in mind and to measure and to look for when we are creating those type of games. Lastly, publishing funnel. So I call it hybrid and hyper, but I would say it's more accurate to call it interstitial-based games versus rewarded videos, and in some games also in-app purchases monetization. So everything starts from ideation, and as a reminder, super important, think on those selling points, on those economy balances, even before we're starting the game, long-term vision. So once we find a good concept with good marketability and initial in-game metrics, we will have the option and the plan all ready to move forward with the game. Marketability test, it's still important, and this is something that I recommend everyone when you're testing your games to measure and accordingly plan the monetization and see that it correlates with the predicted LTV that you think you're gonna get from your game. Then if we're moving to work on a more deeper game loops and hybrid games, we need to start measuring the rewarded videos and the selling points quite early, again, in order to create those selling points and balances and not work on the game and then moving back and changing all of the levels, all of the balance of the game. So it's super crucial to start measuring rewarded videos quite early. And obviously, once we're moving to iterations, it's also important to remember that those type of games, it takes more time to develop, and it takes more time to A/B test and to measure and to balance in order to create the perfect experience and to optimize the LTV. And in the end, soft launch and global launch, which is quite the same. In the end of the day, we are aiming for ROAS and to positive ROI on every type of game. Before the summary, couldn't move forward without asking ChatGPT what he thinks about the hyper-casual industry. So evolving gameplay mechanics, hyper-casual games will continue to prioritize simple and intuitive gameplay mechanic that can be quickly grasped by players. However, there will be a focus on introducing more depth and variety to maintain engagement. This could involve incorporating elements such as skill-based challenges, strategic decision-making, and progressive difficulty levels to offer a sense of progression within the simplicity. So what can I say? We're thinking the same. Cool, summarizing. So I think that the key takeaways from today is that the environment and the ecosystem is changing. The hyper-casual was always fast and was always changing quite quickly. And in order to keep up the pace, we need to analyze and to adjust accordingly. It's important to mention that it's still possible to create the simple, low CPI, high scale games. It's harder to find, but I believe that once the market will go back on track, we'll see more of those type of games. Boosting LTV, this is the main result or the main thing that we need to do in order to compensate with those eCPM downtrend. We will do it with a meaningful economy, a meaningful game loop, and creating rewarded video motivation. And remember the steps. We need to think about it on the earlier stages. We need to ideate every part of the game loop before we are starting to develop the game. We need to know how to test it. We need to know how to measure it. And we need to know how to benchmark those games. This is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Nir. Thank you. And we can get 1 or 2 questions if anybody has. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Çağla Mordenis from AppsFlyer. Thanks a lot for the great session, Nir. I'm here if you are not able to see.
Yeah. I'm blind.
Sorry, it's a dark light. The thing is, it was interesting to see the compression between the money hoops and the traffic jam. But at the end of the compression, we approach them similar as their retention is similar. But I was wondering, how about the playtime for these 2 games?
Good question. The playtime was quite similar. And I think in most of the idle game, playtime is as important as retention. You're right, I didn't mention the playtime, but it was quite similar. If it wouldn't, so it wouldn't be a good comparison.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks again for the great session. My question is about one of your slides. You just simply put a formula that retention, playtime, and CPI kind of equals to RV engagement. I think I missed the CPI part. My question is basically, how does the lower CPI or CPI basically affects the RV engagement?
Okay, so basically CPI is not affecting RV engagement rate at all because CPI is basically the cost per install, how much it costs us to acquire the users on a user acquisition campaign. I think that the main difference that I was trying to introduce is comparing for hyper-casual games, which will be based mostly on interstitials. Retention, playtime will convert into interstitials impressions much better in a very good correlation. Comparing to rewarded videos, which this is what we need to have in order to have a hybrid monetization, retention and playtime doesn't necessarily will convert into rewarded videos because we can create a very fun and very fun experience that users will play a lot of time. They will have a high playtime, high retention, but if they won't have any motivation or challenge or selling points to watch RV, retention and playtime won't convert into rewarded videos, and the LTV will be based mainly on interstitials and simple rewarded videos offer. So CPI, if I need to basically the CPI for those hybrid games is a bit higher, but we're comparing apples to apples, and when I'm talking about CPI, it's basically the same for all of the type of hybrid games. So the rewarded videos engagement rate would be mainly affected by those economy, game loop, and rewarded videos motivation. So it doesn't necessarily connect it into CPI.